This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices slipped on Monday on weak China data, but held on to most of last week's gains, as investors awaited U.S.-China trade talks in London later in the day, hoping a deal could boost the global economic outlook and fuel demand. Brent crude futures slipped 18 cents, or 0.27%, to $66.29 a barrel by 0644 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude fell 15 cents, or 0.23%, to $64.43. China's exports growth slowed to a three-month low in May as U.S. tariffs slammed shipments, data showed, while factory gate deflation deepened to its worst in 2 years, heaping pressure on the world's second-largest economy both at home and abroad.
China's imports of major commodities lost momentum in May, with crude oil, coal, iron ore and copper all recording declines amid concerns about growth in the world's second-biggest economy. Only imports of natural gas showed any improvement, with May's 10.11 million metric tons slightly ahead of the 9.67 million in April, although they were still down 11% from a year earlier, according to customs data released on Tuesday. Crude oil arrivals dropped to 10.97 million barrels per day, BPD, in May, down 6.2% from April's 11.69 million barrels of oil per day and also below the 12.1 million barrels of oil per day recorded for March, which was the strongest month since August 2023.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
New U.S. solar energy installations are expected to fall over the next 5 years as the industry grapples with a shift in federal policy that favors fossil fuels, tariffs and other challenges, according to a report published on Monday by a top solar trade group. New solar capacity will be more than 10% lower in 2030 than in 2025, according to a forecast by the Solar Energy Industries Association and energy research firm Wood Mackenzie. The outlook includes the expected effects of new federal tariffs on a range of imported materials that are important to solar projects, including steel and aluminum. But it does not include potential cuts to clean energy tax credits being considered in a Republican budget bill in Congress, another major threat to the industry if passed into law.
China's crude oil imports fell in May to their lowest daily rate in 4 months, data showed on Monday, as planned maintenance work at both state-owned and independent refiners picked up. May imports in the world's largest crude buyer totaled 46.6 million metric tons, equivalent to 10.97 million barrels per day, BPD, according to data from the General Administration of Customs. The volume dropped by 3% compared with 48.06 million tons in April, and also fell 0.78% from May 2024. In the first 5 months of 2025, China imported 229.61 million metric tons, or 11.1 million barrels of oil per day, up 0.3% from the same period a year earlier, the data showed. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Gold prices steadied on Monday as investors refrained from making significant bets, with optimism building ahead of U.S.-China trade talks later in the day that could ease tensions between the two nations. Spot gold edged 0.1% higher at $3,313.54 an ounce, as of 0543 GMT. U.S. gold futures lost 0.4% to $3,333.80. 3 top aides of U.S. President Donald Trump will meet with their Chinese counterparts in London later in the day to discuss the trade disputes between the two economies, a standoff that has kept global markets on edge.
London copper prices were largely unchanged on Monday, with the market keeping an eye on the U.S.-China trade talks to be held in London later in the day. The U.S. dollar held steady against all major currencies on Monday, as exuberance over an upbeat U.S. employment report gave way to caution ahead of the talks between the world's largest economies. On Monday, 3 of U.S. President Donald Trump's top aides will meet with their Chinese counterparts in London to resolve a trade dispute that has kept global markets on edge.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
China's soybean imports hit a record high of 13.92 million metric tons in May, customs data showed on Monday, more than double the volume imported in April, as customs clearance speeds returned to normal and the operating rate of crushing plants recovered. Imports had plunged to a 10-year low of 6.08 million metric tons in April, as prolonged customs delays and late shipments from Brazil, caused by harvest slowdowns and logistical issues, disrupted the usual cargo flow. Customs clearance speed has returned to around 2 weeks from 20 to 25 days, said Rosa Wang, an analyst from Shanghai-based agro consultancy JCI.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.